Well, today's guest is a real treat to have on the Built for Growth podcast. I have Matt Beaudreau, who is just a wealth of knowledge on what unschooling actually is. We've all been schooled, or most of us have. I was a product of the public school education system myself, and I can't help but reflect and think about how much time was wasted and how the public school system, well, how it started, how it's going, and the adjustments that probably should have been made quite some time ago. We talk about the public school education system, the model, how it was founded, how it all got started to create factory workers. We dive into that in depth. That is the first half of the podcast. And then we really get into the good, juicy stuff that I feel like is what Matt and Tim Kennedy, who is the co-founder of Apogee and Apogee Strong, what they are doing with this program to change the education system, to help our youth really dive into what it is that makes them sovereign, smart, intellectual, curious Americans. I mean, this is what the American dream was meant to be. I believe that our children should be free thinkers and not confined to a box or standardized testing that says that everybody should fit the same model at the same time. And I really applaud what Matt and Tim are doing to change this. So we really do get into a lot of great information, and really, I hope what you gain out of this is that there are options out there and there are choices for you to make when it comes to your children and their betterment, and a lot of the free benefits that come with being a part of the Apogee program. So as you listen about getting unschooled, I hope that you take away from this as much as I did. Thanks for listening. Well, today I have Matt Beaudreau as a guest, and I'm so excited to sit down and chat with you, Matt, because you are such a voice in the sport of change. And I call it a sport lightly, but I feel like it is like you have to move and dodge and shake through so many things to facilitate the kind of change that you are making. And you're making change for our future. And I can't really think of a more honorable thing to dedicate your time to. Our future is everything. They're going to be the ones who are holding us up when our time has turned over to their hands, So I think what you're doing is admirable. And I guess what I really wanted to dive in with you is let's start with education and how it came to be what it is today, from its origin point until today. And I'm talking about formal education because I think there are many ways to get educated. But we have a public school system now that is primarily a formula we all follow. I was educated in a public school system, and I think a lot of my time was personally wasted, but I think we'll get into that. So tell me, where's the origin of this? Why did it start the way that it started, and how did it get to today's format?
Great way to start, man. And I love that you said the sport of change too. I've never heard it phrased that way. I like that a lot because there's so much that goes into it. But you can't play any sport if you don't know the rules of the sport, right? You don't know the rules of the game. And here's the question that you asked was a valid question. It's a great question. I'm glad you started there because most people have no idea the origin. There's this assumption that it's a bunch of, at some point, a bunch of experts, quote unquote experts, sat down somewhere and said, oh, well, what does child development look like? How do we do this? How do we educate a child? And then they came up with school. Could not be further from the truth. I'm very vocal about the fact that, and again, I will always say this, there are good people who are teachers. There are good people who are school administrators. There are good people coming up in the system. A lot of listeners, you're good people sending your good young people to the schools. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the system itself. The system itself was not designed for human development. It was designed around getting obedient slaves. And I'll be very, very intentional with my words on that. So we're essentially looking at a Prussian system. This came from a Prussian military background. This was as the story goes, you had a bunch of soldiers that were not listening as they were battling Napoleon, and they were starting to think for themselves, and they were starting to push back. And there was this Prussian thought of like, ugh, we need to do a better job of raising a population that listens to the government. Blind orders, just go get it. Like, they don't think for themselves. They're smart enough to follow directions, not smart enough to do something for themselves. That's really kind of where the whole thing started. And I always recommend people go listen to John Taylor Gatto, or go read anything he ever wrote, Gatto, because he does a much better job than I ever would at articulating all of the details around this. But the Prussian military gave way to the population going through a series of schooling as young people to essentially listen to the government. The industrialists in our country went, ooh, I like that. I need workers. In fact, Rockefeller said, I need a nation of workers, not a nation of thinkers. He put in what is the equivalent of $1.3-ish billion to create a public education system that created exactly that, a bunch of workers. And people said, well, you're going to do it for 12 years. What are you going to teach them about? He says, well, I'm going to teach them much about nothing. Essentially, very vocally, I'm going to waste their time. And we brought that system that was meant to build workers for the Industrial Revolution, and it doesn't look much different today. The world looks different, but what we do doesn't look a lot different, albeit a little more constricted than it was. So that's really where it started. It's not about child development in the least.
Okay, so I want to clarify a couple things that we are saying Prussia, not Russia,
Right.
and just to be clear for people who are just listening, right? Because I remember hearing that the first time, and I was like, "Are they saying Russia?" Because Prussia is not its own country anymore. It's now,
Correct. Yeah, Prussia was a kingdom in Europe from like 18th to 20th century, and played the role in like uniting Germany, essentially under that state.
yeah. And then Rockefeller, talk about him a little bit more because I feel like it's lightly brushed over, but um, yeah, did I say that right? Rockefeller or Rockwell? Which
Yeah,
one? I get
yeah,
them.
John D. Rockefeller,
Okay,
right?
let's go. I get those two names confused. I had to make sure that I was saying that right. But yeah, talk a little bit more about that beginning of what I feel like was an indoctrination. Explain a little bit more about this man and his history in school.
Well, that's exactly what it was. It's indoctrination. By the way, he also created, to my knowledge, helped fund the creation of what we now see as the pharmaceutical industry, right? So both of these are systems. He understood the power of a system. He understood that if you create a solid system, the system itself is going to be designed to not necessarily do what it's supposed to do for the people it's intended to serve, but the system does a great job of creating a flow to keep itself alive. It becomes a self-propelling organization. And so he was an industrialist. He was a brilliant entrepreneur. And he saw the need for a ton of workers in the factories that he was building. And so he created this general education board, and I think it cost like $130 million at the time. And it provided major funding for schools across the nation and started shaping the school system in his design. So it's exactly what you said. It was an industrialist, an entrepreneur who was going, this will help my businesses move forward, and we can get a population that, again, will be relatively obedient. I mean, that's really what it was for. It was for obedience. So this is a system designed to keep the system itself going.
And how do you feel like that was sold to the American? Because I
Always
think
the greater good.
when you say it that way, it's like you say it like that. I'm like, I don't want to send my kids to that. So how was it presented to the American family that, hey, this is a good idea. Let us take your children for 6 to 8 hours a day and we're going to make them great, right? I imagine that was somewhat of the pitch. But how did this actually unfold to where this became how it's done and it's never questioned?
So that's a really good question. So it's always sold as the greater good. There's always, the best lies have a modicum of truth, right? So this was sold as the greater good. There was a modicum of truth. Hey, we are moving into the industrial age. We have a lot of industrial positions available. If we can train you from a young age on how to be successful in where the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years of our nation are going, you're going to have immediate jobs upon graduation. You're going to be able to take care of your family and you're going to be able to move things forward. That was true at that time. That was true. So many people gained skills that immediately they could go in and start to take care of their families. We started talking about things like, and this is where the truth starts to break down a little. We started talking about things like child labor laws. Right? And started saying, oh, factories, children working in factories. Nowadays, we hear that and we think sweatshops and we think, other countries and they're making our night. Oh my gosh, that's horrible. Children wanted to work for the most part. My 13-year-old works like 30 hours a week right now. Like children like to work. There's actually some value there. They don't have to be made to be slaves. Like they actually can go in and help have great ideas and innovate. And they're made to do that. But we use that as we use the extreme cases, like we do in a lot of things from a population standpoint. Use the extreme cases of somebody being abused and that, and go, look, we got to get them all out of there. If we get them all out, get all the get all the children out of working, we get them, educated. They're going to be better off when they are adults, and then they can go, into the workplace, get these jobs, and ultimately take care of their families. So again, there was a modicum of truth. The problem is that it has stayed that exact same thing. It has turned into a religion because generation after generation has now done the same thing, and we stop taking a look at anything outside of it. We stop taking a look at outcomes. We don't look at the things like literacy rates have actually gone down since compulsory schooling became a thing. People go, well, nobody was able to read before that, right? Like the kids weren't able to. Not true. They were reading at a really, really high level before compulsory schooling. It's
Right.
actually gone down since then, but we don't look at that, right? We don't take a look at those things. We uh, are now in this just generational trend and habit because, well, shoot, my mom went and she said that's what everybody does. And so I'm going to go to school because that's what everybody does. And so I'm going to send my kid. So it was long enough of a system to where multiple generations started going, and then it just became what everybody did. And you start saying that this is preparing everybody for life. And again, the Industrial Revolution, it was preparing people for a while. But then we stopped thinking about the fact that, okay, well, let's see, literacy rates are going down. And then the world is changing now too. We're
Well, when
starting
you
to move
say
out
that
of
real quick, the literacy rates going down. Let me play devil's advocate a little bit. Is that potentially because of electronics and kids spending less time reading books? I mean, I think of probably the 50s or 60s, the kids were probably out reading more. That was a thing. I don't see anybody holding books anymore. That is such a rare thing.
oh,
You don't get on a
but I mean,
subway or get on even an airplane. Everybody's looking to log on to the Wi-Fi, and not that we don't read at all on our electronics, but usually it's for simple communication purposes only. We're not reading to expand on our words. I remember growing up as a kid when I got into books, and I would go and sit outside and I would read, and I would have to look up what words meant because I was enthralled with this story and I really wanted to understand the context of what they were talking about. So do you think that that plays any part of it, or is this a
oh, no,
purely a fail on the education system?
that plays a part of it now for sure. Literacy rates went down before electronics were a popular thing. Before we all had literacy rates were going down in the 50s and the 60s. So this was before any of this stuff happened. Literacy rates were going down. They were still solid, but they were still going down from what it was prior to compulsory schooling. And so, yeah, literacy rates started to go down there, but now it is atrocious partially because of this. Again, it's not just a failure on the school system, although school does a great job of going against child development to actually make people think they hate reading. And then what happens is now we have a generation of parents our age, and I say our age, I know I'm older than you, but roughly our age, that we grew up in reading was made to be a chore. So I know a lot of 40, some odd year old men and women who don't read anymore. So they're not reading in front of their kids, and then they're putting those. So yes, it is significantly dropping now at meteoric rates because again, even in school, we push the academics too early. We tie reading itself to a test versus what books are supposed to be for, which is have great conversations around it and let it change your life. We tie it to a test and go regurgitate this piece here because you're going to have to. So we kill the love of learning now. We kill it altogether. And then parents aren't helping, by again allowing for a lot of these distractions at home. So it's definitely a multifaceted thing. But no, the literacy rates were going down before electronics were even a thing. Now it's just going down faster.
Yeah, so there's a curve here basically where it was helpful, and then what happened where it became not as helpful as it once was? Did everyone kind of get a base level of education, and then all of a sudden there were too many people that were trying to fill these places? Now I know that it's hard to hire good help. Companies are having trouble finding good workers. Like, at what point did that start to change over and the system never thought twice about the model or adjusting it for the times as people were changing and the needs of people were changing?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. And I will always point people back to John Taylor Gatto for better information on the history of everything than they're going to get from me personally. Um, but it's been a slow burn. So if you think about it, we didn't go from industrial age to technology like that, right? It wasn't a drop of a hat. So there wasn't a whoop, here was the moment where it happened. It's been this slow progression where the world itself has continuously changed. There are certain meta skills. And what I mean by meta skills is this always matters. The ability to communicate with another human being is a meta skill that always matters. The ability to articulate what you believe and why you believe it, the ability to remain physically healthy, right? Physical health, which by the way is a precursor to mental health, which is something we talk about with kids all the time, is mental health, like they're catching it or not catching it. Hey, physical health matters, and that's a precursor to that. So like these are things that always matter.
Physical health matters so much.
Oh
I'm
my
sorry
God.
to cut you off right there. I keep interrupting a little bit here and there, but there's these pieces before you move on to the next part. So I want people to understand that scientists are discovering these hope molecules. They're basically a molecule that's released when you squeeze your muscles, and it directly impacts your mood and how you feel about your life. So I couldn't agree more. And it's one thing, as I know we're going to transition soon to the school models that you've begun with Apogee, and I can't wait to talk about that, but how physical education, if you will, or just movement of body is very important in the curriculum that you guys have.
It's a non-negotiable. Yeah, and we will absolutely talk about that. And that is that yes, physical health is a precursor to mental health. It just is. Mental health is not something you have or don't have. Is it in my pocket? I know we have kids that are now culturally thinking like, oh shoot, do I have mental health problems? Like I caught something, right? Or I have it on me or I don't have it. No, it is a byproduct of staying close to what I call factory settings. Staying close to being a physically healthy human being that's got decent humans around you and has a purpose that you're pursuing, right? Mental health is a byproduct of all those things. So I know, yeah, I'm sure we're going to talk about that. But on the school side, it was this slow burn of the world is now changing. The meta skills always matter, but the skills to be successful, the job opportunities, the types of jobs that are available and the type of businesses people are creating, the way the world works is changing. As that slowly started changing, school did not change and adapt along with it. They actually started tightening the reins a little bit. There started being more standardization across the board. The world is changing, the world is changing. We're narrowing the scope of what we're going to do. And it was this simultaneous slow burn. We start to make more standardization, more standardization, more standardization. We start to take away intellectual freedom and intellectual sovereignty from a lot of our teachers. We start to handcuff the teachers a little bit more every year. They're handcuffed a little more. We start to bring in standardized tests. We start to change the way the funding happens. Funding comes from doing well on these standardized tests, and it comes from, depending on what neighborhood you live in, it comes from those property taxes. So it was like this slow burn. Oh, and then the teachers unions are taken over really in like the 50s by a semi-quasi Marxist organization. And again, there's other books I can give you that'll do a better job explaining than I can, but they
Yeah, tell
start
me a couple.
tightening the reins. Communist Manifesto is a huge one.
Okay.
That is one of the best. This one dives into a little bit. It's called Excellent Sheep. It's more about higher education.
Okay.
A very similar thing in how that trickles down into K through 12. So yeah, one's called Excellent Sheep. Highly recommend both of those.
I love that.
So all of these things start happening simultaneously as the world is changing. So instead of us keeping up with the way the world changes and what's necessary for our kids to thrive as they go into the world, we're getting further and further and further away. We already have a game that is designed specifically to make you go work in a factory. Well, most people aren't leaving to work in a factory anymore. So they need a different game to practice. They need a different sport to practice. I love you talked about the sport of change. Mixed martial arts is a sport. Golf is a sport. Those are both individual sports. You did not prepare to fight in the cage by practicing golf all day. Why? It's a different freaking sport. It's not that hard to see it. Well, school is one sport. You can get really good at school and it has nothing to do with life. Those
True.
are
It's
they're
all
different
about
games.
memorization too. I mean, I feel like those tests, what they really teach you is that you've got to try to shove as much information in your brain that you can memorize the night before, or if you're a very good student, you've been memorizing for weeks for this test, and then you forget it all. Because most of the stuff that I learned in school, I can't really recall that because the way of actual learning is not through memorization. Humans are capable of memorizing something. I don't think it's the best way. That's the question. Is it the best way for our children to learn to be sovereign individuals, to think for themselves, to be free thinkers, to be creative, to find what it is that drives each individual American citizen to be their personal best? I mean, I think that's where I have an issue with it.
And it's what so much of it is predicated upon. And there is a room in development for memorization, and it's in a specific stage of development, and it's a very small percentage of the learning arc overall. There's a very tiny percent of where memorization is cool and functional and great. That's a very small piece of the human experience. It's a very small piece of the developmental experience, but it is what a lot of the schooling is predicated upon. But the secret, I don't like secret isn't the word. The real kind of the sneaky is probably the better word. The sneaky lessons aren't that memorization is everything. Everybody know, okay, that's useless. It's a waste of time, especially in a world where you can Google a lot of this stuff. And it's like, frick, so you can still learn to play this game and not be effective. Here's some of the sneaky lessons. And John Taylor Gatto, again, I'm going to reference him again, but he talks about this. Is like he has this article called The 7 Lessons School Teacher. Here are the sneaky lessons. You get taught to be confused. What I mean by that is you get taught that life works in subjects. Everything is out of context. Everything's unrelated. Everything's disconnected because I'm either taking a math class or an English class or a science class. And then we don't even define what any of those mean. So parents, what about science? If you show parents that you've got a microscope there and your kid's going to look through it sometimes and they're going to put some.
Dude, we got one today for my kids. My kids just
But
had their
that's
birthday and they were so fascinated looking at all these different things under. I was like, look at your pomegranate juice, look at this, look at that. And they were fascinated.
and they are fascinated. But here's the thing. Are you now going, okay, cool. They've looked under a microscope once and now they're scientists? Of course not. Right? What the whole thing is, we teach that is the end all be all, and we wonder why people don't. The scientific method is what people really need to gain out of science. And then all of a sudden you can see the relation of everything because the scientific method is about questioning. What am I looking at under the microscope? Hey, by the way, I'm going to take this same line of questioning and I'm going to go into this book and I'm going to go, what is this person thinking? Why were they thinking that? What if I predict that they made this decision in this scenario? Because this is what I would, right? You start to see everything is actually related.
Mm-hmm.
School breaks it all apart and gives you this confusion. School teaches you that you're likely in a class of some sort, meaning like a social class. You're in an economic class, so there's a position, and you got to be careful to not go down into the lower class. And you got to teach school teaches indifference. It teaches you to be apathetic because somebody else is always going to tell you what to do. And it becomes cool not to really care much about anything. And you've got teachers that don't really a lot of times connect with you. And so you learn habitually to be indifferent about life. You learn to be emotionally dependent. You learn to be intellectually dependent. You learn that self-esteem is based on you just doing the right thing for an authority who gives you a carrot and says, good boy. You learn to be Pavlov's dog. Like these are the hidden things in compulsory schooling that I've got the biggest issue with.
Yeah.
Because it just trains apathetic human beings.
Yeah.
Look around. I mean, we see it.
Oh, I've looked around and I see it. And I mean, I've even seen it in bits and pieces in myself, and it's not what I want because I was raised, I mean, I was in the public school system. So there's only, and this is where I want to talk to you about the change that you're making, because we went a lot into the history, but I really want to take the time for people to understand that there is a way to turn the ship around and how they can be a part of it. Not only them, but their children too, because I've had to learn a lot of this later in my life. And I know that my ceiling, or I believe that my ceiling is my children's floor. So when I had children, it was just a huge moment of growth for me where I said, I want to be the best version of myself in every category that I can so that I can provide that for my children.
That is
Right?
the best way to do it, by the way. I mean, that is the one thing parents don't love to hear a lot of times. But what you said brilliantly is it's exactly that. You're sealing their floor. The best way, because by the way, parents, it doesn't matter where you send it does matter, but it doesn't, well, I'm getting in context of the rest of the sentence. It very much matters what you do for their education. But the most educational thing you will do for them is to improve your own education and bring them along with you.
Right.
They be who you are before they do what you say. So you getting better, you pushing yourself forward, and then you making that normal in the house is the most educational thing you can do for your family. My kids will talk about taxes because it's a normal conversation around here. My daughter, and people have a hard time believing. So I've got three right now. They're 13, 11, and 8. When my 11-year-old, when she was 9, I remember very clearly where I was standing in the kitchen because she came up and she says, okay, so if the Fed can just print money anytime they want, why are they so intensely going after taxes? Like, why taxes? They can print money anytime they want. How come they're taxing everybody to death? I'm like, that's a great question. Let's talk about that. So we have this discussion. And I was like, cool, man. I love when they ask good questions. So I post something on that saying, I love this question. Teach your kids to ask questions. This is a question that my 9-year-old just asked me. The amount of your 9-year-old didn't say that to you comments that I got blew my freaking mind. I didn't even think about that as people like coming back. They're like, yeah, right. That never happened. 9-year-olds don't ask those questions. 9-year-old.
Like your 9-year-old doesn't.
Or that's what I said. Maybe your 9-year-old doesn't. This is a normal conversation in my house, right? So parents, what's normal in your house? Is it normal to yell and to scream? Is it normal to just everybody looks at devices and we don't talk? Is it normal to read books? Is it normal to have deep conversations? Is it normal to go, hey, kids, don't ask mom and dad what they make because that's rude. Don't ask them about money. Or is it normal to go, here's how much money came in this month. Here's what our bills look like. Here's the cash flow. Here's the P&L for our business. Is that normal? Because what you make normal will become normal for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm assuming that your children were a big propellant for you in founding Apogee. And
Uh,
and yeah, so talk to me about why and what Apogee stands for.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been in education for 2 decades, right? I was at Stanford University for quite a while and seeing the game there. I was a public school teacher. I was a public school administrator. I was a private school teacher and private school administrator. By the way, most private schools just modeled themselves after the same public school model that we're talking about. I call it the conveyor belt model. So I saw all of those things from the inside out. And my oldest was getting to be in school age. So it was like, okay, well, we're either going to homeschool Or we're going to build something that we're okay with her going to and invite other people to come along. So I started building campuses in California. And what was cool was simultaneously, as I'm building campuses, campus one being I need to make sure my oldest can go somewhere I have designed and believe really actually follows the child's true development and the opportunities that are actually available. As I was building that, I was traveling doing, I mean, I had over 200, that first year I built the school, I had over 200 flights that year. I did like 72 keynotes, was working with organizations all over the country, big organizations that people would know, a lot of organizations people wouldn't know too, but Amazon and Google and Netflix and Microsoft and American Eagle and Lockheed Martin and US Air Force and a whole bunch of organizations people would know. And they were bringing me in to talk about generations because the conversation that all of them were having all over the country, all over the world, all different industries was, man, we're hiring a lot of really smart students, but all they're good at is school. What do we do to actually get them good at a job? What do we do to actually get them to understand how to provide value? We don't understand how they don't fall down more. They can't seem to, manage their emotions. They can't say, it's like, these are the conversations we're having in all of these industries.
Yeah, there's
So
book
I was able
smart
to,
and then there's life smart, right? And I think having a
again,
balance,
two
wasn't that,
different games.
yeah, wasn't that like colleges were all about for a little while? And I'm loosely saying this because I don't know for sure, but it was like 4.0 GPA was like, you're in,
Mm.
right? A little bit, or it was like, that's what they're looking for. And then I heard that it started to be like more like they're looking a little bit more for like a 3.8 because it actually meant that maybe they had some kind of skill outside of just being book smart.
Something
Um,
else going on. Well, and now I'm hearing from these organizations themselves, I don't really care. I don't even care if you have the degree a lot of times, even in degree required jobs. I don't show me that you have the skill set, show me that we match values, show me that there's some work ethic. Give me some provable, like you're elite, like, and I will skip the degree required all day long. By the
how
way,
do you know how many
sign.
people actually use their degrees these days? Because I feel like this is an odd concept for me. I went to college for about a year and a half, and I had a tragedy happen, and I didn't come back for the final trimester. And then my MMA career really started to take off, and I said, you know what, I'm going to pursue this. I'm going to go this different route. I never was thrilled about school to begin with, but it was something that, again, was kind of like everyone needs to do it if you want to be successful at life. You've got to go to college. You've got to get a degree because that's how you make more money. That's how you get hired. So if you don't have a degree, you start at this much for the same job. If you do have a degree, you start this much more for the same job. But then I started to question the whole process. And maybe it's because I tasted it, but it didn't finish. And I said, well, had I finished, I would have been in this much debt if I had settled for this kind of career. But if I really wanted to be like a doctor or something like that, wait, how much debt could I have been in? How long would that have taken me to pay that off anyways? I think I'm doing pretty good, actually. I'm not starting in debt. And then saw all my friends that still went to college and they got these degrees and they didn't use their degree. They ended up doing jobs that had nothing to do with what they went to school for. And I was like, so wait, is it beneficial? Because now before I even had kids, I thought, well, if I had kids, I'm not sure I would push them to go to college. I'd probably say, hey, what is it that lights a fire under you? And is it something that we could maybe do like a trade school, or can you get even more entrepreneurial? Can you create a business concept? Can you go for that? Can you be, what the American dream was actually meant to be about?
And especially as the world continues to change, here's the deal. We have no idea. So we're speaking right now, it is June of 2024. So if I ask you, knowing where the world's going, how fast things are changing, how old is your oldest?
She just turned 6, and my son just turned 4.
Okay, so 6 and 4. So let's
Yeah.
assume 18, right, is graduation, so to speak. So 12 years from now for your oldest. So you're talking 2036. So you tell me in the year 2036, knowing how fast everything's changing in the world, what does the world look like? What are the best opportunities in 2036? What are the most needed jobs in 2036? You have no idea. Neither do I. We don't have the ability to tell the future, but things are changing rapidly, ridiculously rapidly. So, what's important as far as an education? It's not how do I get them to college, in 2036. You don't know what the world, and by the way, in 2036, colleges, I can tell you right now where the trend is going. You've got some that are, your well-funded endowment, myth of the elite college, but the elite colleges, they'll stick around. A lot of the smaller ones are crashing and burning, and then they're going to combine. And people are realizing that college, I can get the same actual education. I don't get the receipt maybe that shows that I paid for it, but I can get the same education a lot of times for free or through these other courses. The opportunity cost, I can go build something and actually have a whole lot of income without the debt. There's so many other options right
Oh,
now
wait, and
for
you
us
mean
to
like
even
gain some life skills that might actually teach them what they might want to do for the rest of their life as opposed to going in
actually do
debt?
that and actually give you a network and actually get, like, there's so many things right now. So forget 2036 and 2038. We have no freaking clue. What do we know? We know for a fact your son, your daughter are going to need to meta skills. They're going to need to be able to talk. They're going to need to be able to communicate with people. They're going to need to be able to lead, persuade. They're going to need to be able to regulate their emotions. They're going to need to be able to know where to get the information at that point, how to obtain it. They're going to need to have, because things are changing so fast, they're going to need to do what our parents' generation has a really hard time doing, unlearning, because our parents grew up in a time where everything stayed pretty much relatively the same the whole time, which is part of the reason they're so hell-bent on everybody has to go to college. Because at that point, it actually did matter. It doesn't anymore. But we're going to have to be able to adapt. Our kids are really going to have to be able to adapt, because what they learn today that's applicable 6 months from now may no longer be applicable. And they got to be able to ditch that. They got to be able to adapt and go, this doesn't matter anymore. This does. And then they're going to have to be able to communicate that too, right? So they got to know where to find the information. Physical health, always going to matter, right? But the ability to self-motivate and go take on some, always going to matter. The ability to pay attention to opportunities. We tell our kids, follow your passion. Okay, follow the opportunities. Take a look at the opportunities and then bring your passion with you. That matters more. Follow the opportunities, because if your passion is in creating, a glyphosate bagel, like, I don't like like nobody wants that, right? And so, like, bring your passion with you. So these are all the things we need to be talking about, and those are the only things we can actually prepare for. To be able to I could not look somebody in the face and go, hey, we don't know what it's like in 2036. So your child right now really, really, really needs to get proficient at algebra, do really good on a standardized test, because that's how life's going to work out, is just like, that's mind blowing to me. That I can't do it.
Yeah, so tell me more about Apogee. What I know, it's based on a Socratic method.
Yes,
You
ma'am.
and Tim Kennedy are founders together, which I absolutely love. Tim Kennedy. He's actually my dad's favorite fighter because my dad was also a Green Beret
Right
and
on.
just loves the military, the approach I think that Tim has in a lot of life and in fighting. So I've had him on as a guest, and just a brilliant man who is wild, but he lives passionately. He is the definition of a dangerous but loving, controlled individual who you would want on your team or your business or anything that you are doing. You know that he will execute and he will be there and he's loyal. I really think that he's a man of his word and hell of a free
One of
thinker, man. Hell of a free thinker.
my favorite freaking humans, for all the reasons you mentioned. Of course, phenomenal athlete, of course, and he's still a disgusting unicorn of an athlete. I still would go work out with him, and obviously anything we do on a martial arts side, it's just a beating. And then anything we do in a workout, I mean, I remember working out with him last time I was out there in Texas, and he had on one of those heart monitor things, and we were at this gym. A bunch of these guys had these monitors on that connected to a screen that was showing their heart rate and all this stuff. And I was just in town visiting. I didn't have any of that. So we're going through all this stuff, and we got done with our workout, right? And I'm like, or our warm up for the workout, and I'm like, okay, this hurts a little bit. And like, I look up and I'm like, your monitor's broken, or you're dead inside something. Like, something's wrong with you. Your heart's not even moving. Like, he's a freaking unicorn of a human. But all of that aside, phenomenal man, phenomenal husband, phenomenal father, brilliant human being, one of the smartest people I know. And one of the most, like you said, one of the most passionate people for doing the right thing and helping other human beings. So yeah, I love him dearly, man. So yeah, everything we're doing on the Apogee, when I say Apogee campus, I want parents to understand, yes, there is a physical K through 12 campus, young men, young women, but everything we are doing is so much, it's connected to so much more than just the physical campuses, and the physical campuses are connected to each other. So, but the campuses themselves, yes, based on the Socratic method at its root is based on human development, those factory settings I was talking about. You're born curious. You're born going, why, how, why, ooh, right? And there's a sense of wonder. The Socratic method is based on keeping that intact. School trains that out of you. Education leans into it, right? We want them to be educated individuals. We want them to be excited and curious and having wonder and going, why? Ooh, what if? So the Socratic method is we're going to ask them questions. We want to pique we want them to come away with more questions a lot of times than answers, because we want them to go dive in and get so curious they have to go find the answer. And then that answer lights them up and they're like, okay, well, what if this? Cool, let's go dive in, right? It's this never-ending, infinite journey. And so there's daily Socratic conversations where we actually place them maybe in the shoes of a hero, somebody in a story, somebody in a movie, and go, okay, here's what's happening. Would you do this or would you do this? Why? Let's have a conversation around it. And we actually teach them how to engage in a conversation. What are the rules of engagement on a good conversation? There's this thing called civil discourse. Most adults can't do it in our country anymore, where we can go, hey, Matt and Miesha are going to sit down and have a conversation. And at some point, we're going to disagree. So then what? So then we go, oh, we're not friends anymore. Forget you. But no, but that's what the world's telling us to do. What we need to do is go, okay, well, Miesha, like rules of engagement, I'm going to be quiet right now. I want to listen. Tell me why you believe what you believe. And then you're going to do things like bring evidence to the table. You're not going to repeat yourself. You're not going to get emotionally charged where you're yelling at me. You're going to articulate it. I'm going to listen to you and go, okay, cool, interesting. All right, interesting. I'm going to take that into consideration. I'm going to go, well, here's what I believe. Where do we actually believe a lot of the same? What are the pieces, right? We're going to engage in this conversation. So we want our kids to understand the rules of engagement of a good conversation so that they understand how to converse and communicate well while maintaining that curiosity. So that Socratic method is a big part of that. We mentioned the physiology part and the physical education part. We know that matters. So actual exercise is a thing on our campuses, and we partner with physiology first so that it's exercise and physiology lessons around it. We want kids to understand. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I want you to understand that these cell phones there can be great tools for sure, but they're also dopamine draining machines. They're designed for you as a young person, and parents too, by the way, to sit there and go click, 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 and your dopamine levels start to deplete. And if your dopamine levels deplete, they need time to actually fill back up. It's like depleting the water out of a swimming pool, and they need time to fill back up. Because if you go out and try to tackle big problems or big conversations when you're in that depleted state, you have actually depressed your dopamine levels and you are operating from a depressed state, depression, right? So, like, we want them to understand physiology matters when it comes to your mental capabilities. So bringing them through physical education matters. Real projects, meaning we're going to put them together and go in 6 weeks, we're going to solve a real big problem. What does that mean? What does that look like? Like what does it mean to live by a code? We're going to take 6 weeks. We're going to dive into the history of living by a code, and you're going to put on a Renaissance fair for your parents that's going to dive into the history of living by a code. How do you actually start a business? Not only are these 6 weeks going to be devoted to you creating a mock business and doing a P&L and then doing a Shark Tank pitch presentation to real entrepreneurs from your community, but the next 6 weeks, you're going to start a real business. You're going to take a product or service to the marketplace, right? We want them doing projects, things that actually matter. They transfer to the real world. Responsibility on campus and economy on campus, our older students getting into apprenticeships and internships, And then, yeah, the academics, by the way, still get met, but we give them solid options, very much like Montessori related, or you can do textbook related if you want. There are computer programs that you can use if you want. We want families to be able to have options to make those decisions. We're going to have coaches that are there with them and bring them through, and they can go through at their pace, at their level of development. Not school says, and there's a grade level that's not based on child development, at their age development. So all of that, those buckets are how we've designed those campuses. Oh, and then by the way, mom and dad go through education as well. Mom and dad get to go through Apogee Man and Apogee Woman, which are phenomenally designed, if I do say so myself, partially because it wasn't just Tim and I designing it. We're working with the best of the best to go, okay, for this finances month, what do people not know and what do they need to know? How can they grow? And what are the projects and challenges and books related to that? Well, mom and dad get to go through that too. And then mom and dad get to go into their own personal psychology, their own health journey, because we want our kids growing on campus and then going home to a family that's also growing. So we've tried to leave no stone unturned. There's no such thing as a panacea. There's no such thing as perfection. We'll figure out where we're missing the boat, and then we'll change and we'll keep getting better. That's the goal.
So another thing I wanted to point out, there's multi-age classrooms. I love that personally.
Yeah,
What's the thought behind that though?
yeah. It's partially again, how does life work? So I'm gonna um, I won't ask you exactly how old you are. I'm sure that's a Google search away. But you and I are not exactly
Mid
the same
30s.
age. Okay, so you're in your mid 30s. I'm 44. Should we not talk? Should we not be able to have like, should you automatically revere me because I'm older? Should I automatically look down on you because you're not? That's ridiculous. That's not the way life works. So there are developmental benefits to having these young people interacting with each other. For the younger heroes, they have older people to look up to, they have older students to look up to and still engage with. When we grew up, you're just around the same date of manufacture at school, right? So somebody that's 1 year older than you is like, oh, 1 year younger, you get to squash them because I'm this grade and you're this grade. It's ridiculous. So we have them interacting. The youngers have somebody to look up to and learn from. The older ones have somebody to take care of and to help teach. They get better
Mentor.
because they pour in and mentor others. And again, it's a microcosm of how life actually works. So like my kids, 13, 11, and 8, the thing that I'm proud of so much that, of who they are. One of the things that you can't help but love as a parent is people come meet my kids and they're like, oh my gosh, like, what do you guys do to discipline them? That's always the question. What do you guys do to discipline them? Right. And I'm always like, dude, you got to throw a 3 and then a 2 right now. I'm like, it's, we don't have to discipline them because we have taught them how to be disciplined individuals. We have brought them along with us. We've taught them we've always been the authority. This is not the whole gentle parenting, we're best friends thing. That's garbage. But it's also not do as I say, not as I do. It's like, no, I'm going to lead by example, and then I'm going to have you come along with me, and I'm going to show you how to do this. I'm going to correct you when you're wrong, but I'm going to show you. I'm going to coach you as we do this, right? It's like a jujitsu coach. It's going, all right, no, I want you to roll a little bit. All right, I'm going to get in and show you this technique, and I'm going to back up, and I'm going to roll, right? And so we've taught them to be disciplined individuals. And so now they're comfortable having conversations. When little kids come over, they're like, oh my gosh, come on, let me show you, let me help you, let me coach you, let me teach you, let me play with you, let me pour into you. Adults come over and they're like, hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. Let me shake your hand and I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to like engage in a conversation. They're used to it. We want the same thing for all of our kids.
Yeah, I draw back to my own experiences as a parent with I'll use my daughter as an example. She has an older cousin, and just the fascination with her older cousin. I remember watching my daughter watch her older cousin brush her teeth while she was brushing her teeth, and she just had this look of awe and kind of enthrallment and What can I learn from my cousin right now? How does she brush her teeth? And it's like you could see the wheels turning, and she was sort of, in a way, I guess, a sort of imprint, if you will, use that term loosely, but there was something being captured there in that moment just by them brushing their teeth together. And I think it's really powerful to remember that children learn so much from their elders, whether that's 1 year older. I mean, we're siblings, and my kids are 2 years apart. My son learned so much from my daughter, and he has so much influence in that. And I think that there's a benefit to that, because it's always going to drive the younger kids to, to excel at their maximum capacity. And I feel like when we can regulate our emotions as parents, we are the primary role models, right? We have to learn to do that first and foremost and set the example to maintain the calm when your child is melting down, right? To be the consistent, to be the calm. But then they also have these other important key people in their life that they're surrounded with on a regular, that if we were, I call it, in the wild, basically, even just the world the way that it exists now, my daughter will likely, in the real world, as a child or especially as an adult, be in a room that is only her age of people. I think that's a hindrance to what our children can benefit from each other, because I also believe, and when I found out that Apogee was multi-age, I think there's one that's opening here in Henderson. I know that, and it's ages 5 to 7 and 8 to 11. So what a 5-year-old can learn from a 7-year-old, or an 8-year-old from an 11-year-old, and vice versa. Because does that automatically mean, and I know what parents are going to say, well, how about protecting my child? What if this child is a bully? What if it's a bad situation? Well, I think what we're trying to create here is a democracy where everyone has a voice, right? There's structure in that. Yeah. And the 7-year-old is going to remember what it was like to be the 5-year-old and share that kind of back and forth. Hey, I still need to have time and space to hear the 5-year-old and respect what the 5-year-old has to say. As an individual, as having autonomy, we're going to teach them to respect everyone's autonomy and everyone's voice and have it be heard, and have disagreements, right? That are respectful, that you could still shake someone's hand at the end of the day, have a hard conversation and say, it's okay. You're still a good person. I don't completely agree with you here. I don't completely align with you here, but I love this about you. I hear what you're saying. I'm going to validate what you're saying. It's great. I may not change my opinion, or it may change my opinion. You may, if I'm actually listening, if I'm listening to listen instead of listening to respond, if I've had an environment that is conducive to that through school and through home, or through education and through home, which are one and the same, really, then we're going to have children who understand how to have hard conversations, who understand how to be respectful when they disagree, who understand how to learn from other people. They're not listening to respond, they're listening to actually listen. So that is going to facilitate, as they grow through, to always remember that everyone has a voice and everyone has a right to have that voice heard.
That's right. And they'll be brave enough to change their mind if better evidence is presented. Right. And that's one thing we struggle with as well. We get somebody that shows us something, or like, oh no, because my family says this, or because my background tells me this, or let's have the conversation and be brave enough to pull the string a little bit and dive into, like, all of those things that you said are so dang spot on. Talking about that 5 to 7, 8 to 11, it's a developmental range is what we're looking at. And so what we're talking about on campus is having those young heroes that are roughly in the same developmental range, but there's still a little bit of that gap, so that you're exactly right. The 7-year-old can go, I remember when I was 5, I want to make sure they have that. Like, those things actually happen. That actually happens, where you have those conversations and the 7-year-olds will step up for the 5-year-olds and they'll take care. That is a real deal. And then you have the 8 to 11, and they're having Socratic conversations together. And then there are times on campus where all of them are together, and the 11-year-olds are taking care of 6-year-olds, or the 6-year-olds are like, hey, I know this is it. And they're calling out the 11-year-old. Right? And the 11-year-old's like, yeah, you're right. Like that. Those things actually happen in a solid environment. Do disagreements happen? Of course. But like you said, they learn how to disagree as well. There's ways to disagree And so here, let's go ahead and facilitate this disagreement. That's all right too. It's okay to disagree. But what you said is right. Everybody gets this voice. And the word bully, you said bully, like, oh, I'm worried because the different ages, there's going to be bullies. No, bullies happen because of how school looks now. Bullies happen because you are only with your age and you're in an environment where you don't have a voice. You have to raise your hand, even as an 18-year-old, to ask somebody else's permission to go use the restroom. Somebody else is telling you what to do, when to do it. And then even when you're in the middle of obeying, they go, ding, go obey somebody else now. And you go, okay, don't talk in the hallway. Okay. When you get in there, like your whole life is around being obedient and apathetic because you don't have control over anything. That's how bullying starts, because now you go out to break or to recess or whatever that looks like. And you're like, oh, I have to exhibit some form of power. So what am I going to do? I'm going to find my clique, and the easiest thing, I'm going to go ahead and pick this other group. Man, if they're younger, even easier, right? Bullying happens because of that, not because of the way life is structured. Bullying happens because school is structured more like prison, where they've got to come out and figure out a way to get their voice somehow. So yeah, you're spot on. And we talk about the whole, like, you know, you're the product of the five people you spend the most time with. Yes, who you're around matters 100%. But for some reason we think, oh, with kids, whoever. What? It's quite the freaking opposite. Like, you want to make sure they're around. So look, they're not going to agree with everybody that's there on campus, but you want to have that same starting shared values that are there, and then let life play out and have the disagreements, because you at least know you got families that have the same values. We're really intentional about that too. That's not an echo chamber. That's what you're supposed to do as humans, is be around other good humans. The echo chamber happens because you don't ever learn how to question and talk and have hard conversations with each other and question your own beliefs, which we're very much going to dive into. So yeah, everything you said right there, spot flipping on.
So, and can I say one other thing that I love about this program? And mind you, my daughter did 1 year at an academy, which is a public school, but it's supposedly, just like one step refined, if you will. And I am that mom who was like, well, I want to work here. I want to work here. I work the lunches.
Yeah.
And I worked 2 hours a few days a week. It's what I could spare. It's what I could invest in my daughter's development, if you will, at that time at the school. And although it was a good public school, it just wasn't up to what I wanted for my daughter. I was like, it's not what I want. It was fine for what it was. It was better than a lot of most public schools, in my opinion. It was fine. But I think one of the things that I absolutely did not like about it, and this is probably very biased towards my own experiences because I understand how important nutrition is the public school lunches
Prison
and
food.
and the lunches that were even brought from home, and just realizing how much people don't know how important it is to feed our children well, and thinking that when you go to any store and you see prepackaged items that make lunch really easy to provide, that those things are good for our children. I mean, my daughter would get picked on for eating half of an avocado. Like, why would you do that? She would, and she's in kindergarten. But these kids genuinely did not know what whole, uninterrupted foods looked like. If she ate goat cheese at school, she came home one day so upset. She said, "Mom, I don't want to have that in my lunch again." Like, the kids made fun of me. They didn't know what it was, and they thought I was gross for it. And it's so hard as a parent, or as a person who cares about the health and well-being of others, especially my children, to see them go to an environment that is so far from conducive to health and wellness. By the
Mm.
way, did you know what the largest fast food chain is in the world? Maybe chain isn't exactly the right word. Let me look this up here. The largest fast food franchise in the world. Do you have any idea what it is? Pop quiz.
I mean, largest fast food franchise, I would lean towards McDonald's.
Right. You would think, right? It is the American public school system.
using that as, and yeah, however they're defining that, I believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know you think of fast food as, um,
Yeah.
like McDonald's, but that is actually the equivalent of the food that is served. The lunch is there. I have a friend of mine, actually my best friend lives in Switzerland, and it's quite different there, and I love having conversations with her because her upbringing, she was a foreign exchange student at my high school and we became friends. My grandma's from Switzerland, so I was like, this is a no-brainer. But without diving too much down that, she said, I always did think that that was so strange, and the food system and how unhealthy it was compared to their food there. She said one time I got dizzy and she's like, I think I lost consciousness. She was sharing this story with me and she started laughing because she said, when I woke up, they had a piece of pizza waiting for me. And it was like the real kind of, you remember public school pizza, that it's literally it doesn't seem healthy in the slightest way. And
It does.
she thought, man, shouldn't I be eating something healthy? I mean, she had the know-all and the wherewithal to question the fact that she had just had a alarming situation where she had lost consciousness, maybe blood sugar was low. I don't know exactly, but that the first thing that they really thought was a genuinely good idea was to feed her public school slice of pizza. And she could question that. And I'm like, I'm so glad to hear that my best friend at that
Smart.
time even was questioning it in high school, but that we feed our children these things that are not good for us if they're getting hot lunch and if you're getting cold lunch. And so I genuinely wanted to compliment one of the things that I think really made me appreciate Apogee, on top of the idea of putting families back together,
Mm.
of letting the parents have transparency in their children's education, what is going on with them and what is being taught in school, the ability to come into the classroom with, of course, prior notice, but at any time be as much involved as we would like to be with the Apogee program, and that the first and second ingredient are not allowed to be sugar.
I mean, keep the garbage out. We
Yeah,
can,
keep it out. Because my daughter I want her to go and not feel like she is the oddity and the misfit because she has a clean lunch.
yeah, and it's crazy that we're at this point where there are people who are going to hear that and be like, "Well, you can't, don't jump." Cool, man, great. You do you. That's fine. But we can't argue against the facts that if you're going to feed poison to people, they're not going to be the best versions of themselves. I don't know any other way to put it. I'm going to put it as plainly as possible right there. If you feed poison to them all the time, I get there are people who like, there are kids who those are the meals they're getting for the week, are those at school. I get that. I understand it. So that's the example that's used a lot of times. Like, well, that's the best thing they're going to get, and they're not getting it. Okay, cool. But why does that mean we have to feed them garbage too? I don't understand the correlation here between prison food and that's all we can do. No, we spend a massive amount of money in our schools. We'd be better off eliminating a ton of the money we spend on textbooks and the new versions of this and that to get a better quality of food and bring physical education back into like we'd be better off for our kids. It's crazy, and it's the whole socialization piece. This does play into it. The whole socialization piece of people going like, oh, well, kids are going to have to learn sometimes. They're going to have to, if they get bullied because their lunch looks different, they're going to have to learn sometimes. There's bad people out there. No, that's not how you raise a human being. That's like me saying, all right, well, Miesha, you want to, business is hard, so you should go to prison, go to a women's prison.
Yeah, let me support making it
Hey,
harder than life already is. What does that make any sense?
it
I'm a
makes no freaking
I'm a big
like
fan of Gabor Mate. I don't know if you know him. He's a doctor, yeah, and a trauma specialist, and he talks about
yeah.
that, how the parents, basically life is hard enough. Like, kid's gonna break their arm, their cat's gonna die, their family members, some grandma's gonna pass away. Like, it's already gonna be hard. You should be the safe place for them. You should be the place that they can always know that they can come and have their most vulnerable emotions available to you, and they know that you are the place where they can do that, where they can have a conversation. We could say, you know what? Hey, I feel like my teacher, and we talk, I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, the solicitation of students and the indoctrination of students, and you hear about these cases where students are being sexualized in the classroom. I mean, I was just reading about one, or outside the classroom, but via the classroom, where a female teacher with students around age 12 got their gaming handles
Yeah,
and,
you
you know,
Roblox.
yeah, there you go, and started gaming with them. So, and then she began sending them, illicit images, and is supposedly pregnant now with what she claims is a 12-year-old child. So I think what parents need to understand here is that if you are the hardest thing in your child's life, I feel like it is short-sighted, because life's already going to be hard enough. We don't have to support our children or teach our children to think that they just have to take it when people are mean to them. I actually think that my children are relatively they're sensitive, but in a way that's just very aware. They understand very clearly when somebody is not speaking to them in a respectful or kind tone, which they deserve, because they are human beings. They're tiny human beings, but they are humans with feelings, and they have a right to respect just like anybody else's planet. And that's how we teach it. We teach it through respect. So I think that when life is hard, I believe that those 5 people should be the people that they come to and say, I thought it was really weird, Mom, that my teacher started playing games with me, and guess what? Like, she sent me something I'm just not sure about. They feel safe enough to come and talk to you. If you are a scary place, if you are a authoritative, disciplinary, suck it up, deal with it. I had to deal with it. I had to deal with teachers I didn't like. I had to deal with bullies. That doesn't make two wrongs a right. It doesn't support the kind of atmosphere, I think, that you might want to second guess just because you went through it, just because you had to endure. Please, I beg you, as Mr. Rogers said, remember what it felt like to be that child. Did it feel good? Did you feel safe? Did you feel heard? Did you feel seen? Did you feel validated? Did you feel like you had a voice? And if the answer to those things are no, then ask this: would it have been nice to have been seen, to have been heard, to have been validated, to have had a safe place to go when you felt like something wasn't right, and maybe you weren't sure if it was right or wrong, but you had somebody to go to ask it in a safe place? That's what a parent's job is. It's to be the place where your child can fall to their knees and cry because the rest of the world is so damn hard.
So true. We don't need to manifest, like, the challenges will manifest themselves, and cool. At a school campus, you want them to be able to grow. So yeah, you bet. Manifest some hard challenges. What's the hard? The hard looks like the exercise. We're all going to exercise together, and we can cheer each other on, and we'll do the hard through physical, because there's a return on investment. The hard will be pitching our business in 6 weeks and having to hit the deadline. And that's hard, that is conducive to growth. Being in an environment where you're getting fed prison food and having a bunch of people bully you because you don't want to eat the prison food, that's not the hard that you manifest. That's
Right.
exactly it.
Yeah.
That's not the same thing. There's not, the ROI is not the same in that regard. So no, I could not agree more.
Yeah. So those are some things that I really appreciate about the Apogee program. How many schools, how many campuses are across the United States right now? What are we looking at?
So we had over 400 people apply year one, and I just took them through a full year um, of training, not just around the pedagogy, as well as the business side of how to do this well, as well as connecting them together and collaborating and introducing them to all of our partners. And so we've gone through a whole year. So we have about 50, almost 50, that are launching here in the fall of 2024. And then we had almost 900 applications this last go around. And we're extending offers to just over 100 that would launch in 2025.
On top of the 50 or in total?
On top of the 50.
All
Yeah.
right.
Another, so fall of 2025, theoretically about 150-ish campuses.
Awesome. So I know that we're getting to the closing parts of this podcast, but what are we looking at for cost, or is that a roadblock for people? What are the roadblocks? Because to me, this is genius. Like, why doesn't everybody do it? So what is the holdup? Why aren't more people on board with this? Why is the public school system not on board with this? And I hope that that's a loaded question. So let me know if you're able to make it in bite-sized pieces, or we could
It's
take
a
as long
great
as we need.
question. It's a great question. So for parents, the biggest costs are usually the emotional cost of doing something different. A lot of times it is that, right? Because they're like, oh, because we grew up alternative meant these are the kids that are on their way to juvie. And so like this is a lot, right? And so like we're like, no, we're just the alternative to this conveyor belt schooling system. This is a microcosm of real life, and it's a real community of real people that are coming together around these values, wanting to do what's best for our kids. So there's that emotional side of people like not wanting to be different, but then we also understand the downside of any kind of privatized educational experience is that you got to pay for that. We understand that. I know I've built multiple campuses around this country. I understand that can be a hiccup. So even that, Tim and I are doing everything we can to make this wildly available. So we actually have two foundations. Miesha, yesterday I sat down for 30 minutes and just wrote checks. I wrote out checks, $52,000 worth of checks that I got to write out yesterday from one of our foundations to scholarship kids to go to some of these campuses. Give me a freaking break. It's fantastic. So we have two foundations. We have the Apogee Education Foundation, Apogee Strong Foundation. They are two different types of 501c3s. They can take different forms of money, but both can take direct donations from people, fully tax deductible. And 100% of that money, this is not going into Tim's pocket or Matt's pocket. 100% of it goes to campuses and families. So we're making these things wildly available. We have our own payment processing system that any business can use instead of PayPal or Stripe. And instead of us taking money on the margins, that money goes into the foundation and it goes to scholarship kids. We have all of our campuses also paying tuition through that. So what does it do? It builds out a scholarship fund just based on other people paying tuition. So we're going to continue to push these programs over and over and over, because eventually what will happen is we will get to an endowment that will allow us to make this freely available to any good human being who agrees with our values and wants to be able to send their kids to our campuses. We want these things to be available so that money is no longer a cost. That's the biggest one. It's because people went, okay, school is quote unquote free, and I always planned on being able to send my kid to school, and that was free. To come up with another, $6, $8, $10,000 for I wasn't planning on that. So we're trying to make it as available as humanly possible for that. And then people have to get around the understanding again of what school and education, those differences. Those are the biggest hiccups.
Yeah, honestly, you want to be educated. You don't want to be schooled. I'm telling you right now. The other benefit I would be remiss to leave this out, because I do want people to know that there is such a big benefit to joining their children joining this program, is because what I understand is that Apogee men and Apogee women is included with this. And I've heard you say it before, that the family dynamic is the most important dynamic. This is where children are going to gain the most of who they are and who they will be. So explain to me a little bit what Apogee Men and Apogee Women is. By the way, I have not joined the Apogee Women program, but my daughter will be joining Apogee this coming year. So I'm very excited for her. And I want to get on this platform as soon as possible.
You'll be put in there. You're going to be one of these Apogee parents. So you're going to go through the whole thing. And what's really cool, so Apogee Men, Apogee Women is designed to be able to stand alone for anybody that doesn't have, because I've had people reach out and they're like, oh, I don't have a kid that can go to the campus. You can still come in and go through the process. But yes, all of the parents on our campuses get to go through Apogee Men and Apogee Women. So this is a 12-month, and we actually have a year 2 if people want it, but it is a 12-month program that goes into perpetuity. And what that means is it's 12 months it's not just designed by Matt and Tim. Like the personal psychology month was Matt and Tim. Oh, and Todd Herman, who was a sports psychologist who worked with Kobe Bryant. It was Jordan Peterson, right? It's Andrew Schultz. So it's these Andrew Shaw, sorry. These guys who that's their work. So they designed that month for us. So month one for Apogee Man, Apogee Woman, you will have coaches that are Apogee trained who are right in there with you. You have other people who are going through it at the same time. You've got projects, challenges, and books all related to your own personal psychology. We're coaching you through all of this so that you're continuing to grow. And then we're bringing in guest mentors every single week to be able to talk to as well. You are coming on as a guest mentor for our women, right? We're going to bring you in. You're going to come in on the show, but you're going to get to talk directly to the women of Apogee Woman. We just had Dr. Gabrielle Lyon come in and talk about nutrition for the Apogee Woman. We just had like that's what we do every single week on the men's side. You know, who we just had we've had Montel Jordan just came in for our young men. We just had Ben Greenfield, you know, Alex Hormozy, Andy Frizella, Brian Callen. Like I don't, it's just we're bringing in the best of the best of the best humans every single week that you're also getting to chat with. But every month is a different focus. So we take a look at your personal psychology. We take a look at your time and energy management and setting a chief definite aim for yourself for the year. We take a look at your physical health and nutrition. And we'll bring in, Dr. Andy Galpin or Rob Wolf and people that are ninjas in this field. We take a look at your spiritual journey. And by take a look, we don't mean we go, here's what you need to believe. We teach you how to think critically, which means you get to question what you believe and why you believe it and be able to articulate somebody else's point of view. Like we actually make you dive into other people's spiritual beliefs so you have an idea, why do I believe what I believe? We talk about intentionality in marriages, in the parenting. We take a look at sales. We take a look at marketing. We take a look at your personal finances as a family. And how do you understand the financial game and what are options from the finances side? We want families to have the best information available to them. We're not going to tell you what to do. We're going to give you projects, challenges, mentors, and books around it to make sure that you are growing too. So your son and daughter go to the campus and they're talking growth all day long. They come home to a family that is growing together. That's how we reclaim this country. We get sovereign, educated families again.
That's a great closing note. And I just wanted to also mention and make sure that you know that if you send your child to Apogee, that this is included. This is not
Yes,
an
ma'am.
extra fee.
This is
So,
not an extra fee. No, this is included. We want mom and dad as part of this growth.
yes. All right, Matt. Well, thank you so much for your time today.